wrote to my mother and sister. Didn't let on to them that I was as frightened as I was. I was frightened, I'll admit it. Wrote to my father too. I think he is more in favor of my flying than my mother and sister. But I told them all that if I were to pop off in the middle of an adventure such as that, I would be all right. I've had a very happy life. And when one is handed an opportunity such as that, one doesn't say no. One takes it, that's all. And perhaps at some point, since I am a bit of a daredevil, perhaps at some point I'll meet my end flying, I don't know. But that's all right, because I'm doing what I love to do. And I can't imagine doing anything else except the social work, which is, of course, what I plan to go back to doing as soon as I finish this tour. I'm blabbering. You're the press. I'm sure you have questions.
What have you had to give up for your flying career?
I had to give up a great deal of time, I've only been flying for 4.5 years. And I spent every free moment during that 4.5 years with my nose in a book, learning the engine mechanics and learning about air currents. And I've just spent a great deal of time that I suppose I could have spent socializing or something else. But I don't feel that I've given anything up. I feel the most alive when I'm flying, and there's nothing I'd rather be doing, so it's worth any sacrifice to me.
Are you married?
No, I have a friend, but most men will require that their wives stop working, and I am not ready for the life of a domestic robot. I don't know that I ever will be. So no, I'm not married.
Do you think women are physically available and capable of that accomplishment of the men?
Are women physically capable of the same accomplishments as men? In most cases, yes. I think they're, especially when it comes to flying, there's very little that a man can do that a woman couldn't. I'm the mechanic for my own plane's engine. I suppose it remains to be seen what women will be able to accomplish. But they must first get over the fear of crashing, let us use that term. And I don't necessarily mean in flying. They must get over the fear of failing. Men have pushed at boundaries for generations, for thousands of years. Men have pushed at boundaries, and a great many of them have failed. But through their efforts, we've made great progress. Now, it's true, when a woman fails, a great deal more is made of her failure than when a man fails. But I think there will come a time when that's no longer the case. I think there will come a time when men and women are both seen as being perfectly capable and equal physically in most ways. It is true, men have stronger arms than women, but that certainly has nothing to do with flying.
Have you ever been insulted in any way for being a woman?
Been insulted? Well, I'll admit, when I first started taking lessons, I took lessons from a woman. Netta Snook. She's one of the best pilots you'll ever meet. And the main reason that I wanted to take lessons from a woman was that I didn't want to see I didn't want men to see, rather, me making mistakes. I wanted to be competent before the men ever saw me fly. No one has insulted me. The men at Kenner Field didn't know what to make of me at first, but once they saw that I was serious, that I was there to fly and not to find a husband, I think I gained their respect. And I actually, now, I'm on the board of one of the directors of Denison Airport, and I'm the secretary of of the FAA. And so I think I'm taken seriously as a pilot. There are near, what are there? 98, 99 perhaps women who are pilots now. So I'm by no means the only one. And we're proving ourselves to be every bit as good as the men.
Are you feminist?
I don't
Feminist.
think-
I wouldn't call myself a feminist. But I would say I have always been fascinated by the accomplishments of women, and I've always kept a notebook with newspaper clippings and the like, articles of women who've accomplished great things. In fact, I was so excited to find that the mayor of your city, Southampton, is a woman. I'll have to put that in my notebook as well. So no, I don't suppose I would say I'm a feminist, but I do very much think that women can accomplish anything they set their minds to. So if that makes me a feminist in your eyes, perhaps I am.
Are you intimidated by me?
Intimidated by men? No, I spend most of my time with men. There are many more men than there are women flyers.
Because you seem like you have to prove yourself to them.
I have to prove myself to myself.
What are you proving to yourself?
But I can do anything I set my mind to, I suppose. And I've taken some foolish risks, I'll admit. I was at an air show once, and I decided to have the altimeter in my Airster sealed. And I went up to 14,000 feet to test the ceiling, to see how high she could go. And she stalled. And it was foggy most of the way to the ground. And as I was going down through the fog, I decided I would wait until the fog cleared before I straightened out. Without visual cues, you may think that you're flying straight and you may be on your side or upside down even. It's very difficult to be able to tell without visual cues the attitude of the plane, the position of the plane. So I waited until the fog cleared, but that was only 3,000 feet up. And one of the other pilots pointed out to me, what would I have done if the fog had gone all the way to the ground? So I've taken some foolish risks. And I suppose I've learned I don't have to prove everything to myself. I don't like boundaries being put in front of me, and if there's a boundary, I will push at it.
So why did you do the flight? Were you frightened?
I did it for the fun of it. If someone were to approach you and ask you to be the very first to do something, and you knew you were capable of it, wouldn't you do the same? And was I frightened? Yes, I was frightened. As I've said, 14 people have died in the past year alone trying to accomplish that. But I was never frightened about the flight itself. Captain Stultz is one of the very best pilots in the world. And so I was extremely confident in his abilities. Now, we did have a frightening moment. Now, we were flying the Friendship, which you may know was owned by Admiral Byrd, who recently explored the North Pole. And my sponsor and benefactor, Mrs. Frederick Guest, purchased the airplane from him and was intending to make the flight herself, but her family was too frightened and wouldn't allow her to do it. So she looked for another woman who could, and that's how I was chosen. The wheels were taken off of the Friendship and pontoons put on. But they form a vacuum with the surface of the water. So unless the water's very choppy, it's almost impossible to take off. And we were on our way first to Newfoundland, where we stayed for several days, well, it turned into 2 weeks before we flew over. The water was choppy, just choppy enough, and we were too heavy. We had a fourth crew member who ended up having to get off the plane in order for us to get out of the water. We had to jettison several of the fuel containers Captain Gordon and I went to the very aft of the plane in order to help the nose rise. Captain Gordon had tied the door to one of the gas cans. The latch on the door had just broken. And he had tied it to one of the gas cans. But as we lifted off, because it was bumpy, the plane veered to that side, and the door flew open, and the gas can began to slide out. And I knew that would spell disaster. If the gas can flew out, that sudden jerk of that weight would be enough to tip our wing down into the water, and we would crash. So I leapt on top of a gas can to try to stop it, but then of course I was sliding towards the door, and Captain Gordon grabbed me and pulled me back, and just then Captain Stoltz was able to right the plane and the door slammed shut. So I wasn't frightened at that moment. I was too intent on trying to stop the gas can, but in retrospect it was terrifying, and I'll admit that I shook for a great deal of time after that. But the transatlantic flight was a very serene thing. I spent most of that time looking out the window at the clouds down below. And I know none of you have ever seen the tops of clouds, unless you live very high in the mountains. They look solid. It looks almost as though you could jump onto those clouds and they would catch you. It's like a vast expanse of cotton. And in the most fantastical shapes, there were bears and dolphins and anvils, and as the sun never completely went down because we were so high, but as it dipped, the most fantastic colors in those clouds, I'll never forget it. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. So I had no time to be frightened because I was so amazed at the beauty of the scenery there up in the clouds. 20 hours and 40 minutes it took us. And in that entire time, I think I had one orange and 2 pieces of chocolate. I was too engrossed in what I was seeing even to want to eat.
As a child, were you more mechanically inclined than the other girls?
Was I more mechanically inclined? We all had our fun, didn't we? We all made things. I made a chicken trap when I was 6, if that counts as being mechanical. And it worked. The neighbors' chickens were always coming into our yard, and I made a chicken trap, which was a box with a stick, and I tied a string to the stick, caught the chicken. My mother wasn't pleased with me. We made a roller coaster. Then, around the same time, we had gone to the World's Fair and seen a roller coaster, and my sister Pidge and I, when we came back, told my Uncle Carl about it. And he helped us build one. It was only it was a long board to the roof of the shed. And we took a sled down the board. And I was the first one down, of course. And the first time the board was at too steep an angle, and the sled and I both tumbled off. But we changed the angle and had great fun until my parents saw. And then, of course, down came the roller coaster. I do like mechanics. As I say, I am the mechanic for my own airplane's engine, and I'm not afraid of any kind of jobs that seem masculine. I drove a gravel truck for a time in order to raise money for my flying lessons. So there's not much I'm not interested in, to be honest. I even learned how to play the banjo several years ago. Don't know when I'll use that skill, but I was interested, so I did it.
First time you ladies, have you met Colin Lindenberg, Colonel Lindenberg, and you think you look like him?
Do I think I look like Colonel Lindbergh? Oh, at this moment, I think I probably look like no one and nothing else in the world. And when I meet him, if I ever have the chance to do so, I'll be certain to apologize to him for that comparison. Well, gentlemen and ladies, again, thank you for coming. And when you write for your respective newspapers and magazines, please do me the favor of not concentrating so much on the accident of my sex, having been, as I was, merely a passenger, but remind your readers that it was Captain Stoltz who was the pilot, who did the flying on this flight But I also encourage you to encourage your female readers to push any boundaries set before them and to try flying themselves.